My name is Hannah Cole, and when I was 15 years old, my mother locked the door and forced me to stand outside in a blizzard wearing only a thin nightgown, just to teach me gratitude. Snow sliced into my skin, the wind tore through my lungs, and my brother filmed the whole thing while laughing. Have you ever been turned into a joke by your own family, even when you were trembling between life and death? I'm telling this not to complain, but so that anyone surrounded by silence knows they are not alone. If this story makes you think of something you've never dared to speak out loud, leave a comment, subscribe, and share so more people can hear. Because that night was only the beginning of a chain of truths they tried to hide for nearly 2 decades. I still remember that afternoon vividly, every detail looping in my mind like a film. The sky was slate gray, wind whistled down empty streets, and snow lay thick on the sidewalks, untouched. I sat in the last row of the school bus, clutching my backpack to my chest, hiding the bruise on my right arm. That afternoon, my math teacher, Ms. Grant, had kept me after class. Her gaze wasn't sharp like when she was grading tests. It was slow, observant. "Hannah, what happened to your arm?" I was about to lie and say I tripped, but she looked straight at me, not blinking. Before I could think, the truth slipped out. "Tyler squeezed my arm yesterday. I wouldn't let him copy my test." Ms. Grant let out a quiet sigh, her voice low but firm. "I'll be calling home." "Hannah, this isn't okay." Stepping off the bus, it felt like the cold slid straight into my spine. The front door was cracked open, warmth spilling out, but it couldn't thaw the chill in my chest. Inside, Tyler sat on the couch, feet propped on the coffee table, scrolling through his phone without looking up. Dinner that night was as heavy as if each spoonful of soup carried silence. My mother, Loretta, set the table as perfectly as always, crisp white tablecloth, cinnamon-scented candles, silverware placed just so, but her face was a mask. Not a glance in my direction, only her lips pressed tight and the dry sound of spoon against bowl. Tyler twirled his salad with a fork, glancing at me with that faint smile I knew too well, the smile of someone who knows they've already won. No one mentioned Ms. Grant's phone call, but I knew they had received it. In this house, silence didn't mean forgiveness. It was the pause before deciding how to strike. When dinner ended, I stood to clear the dishes, feeling my mother's eyes follow my every step as if weighing the moment to give an order. I washed the plates, wiped the table, pushed the chairs back. Just when I thought I could go upstairs, her voice came from the living room, soft, almost sweet. "Hannah, tomorrow's trash day. Go bring in the bin for me." I froze. The cold outside tonight wasn't like other nights. The temperature had dropped to 20 below, the wind carrying tiny needles that pierced every layer of fabric. I glanced at the window. The porch light glowed weakly, snow whipping through the yard. I was in a long-sleeved nightgown, thin wool leggings underneath, socks on my feet, no shoes, no coat. "Mom, I didn't finish before Loretta turned her head, her gray-blue eyes locking on me without a blink. "Hannah, I already told you." I swallowed hard. I knew that tone. If I argued one more word, the consequences would be worse. I opened the door, and the wind slapped my face instantly, making my eyes sting. Each step sank deep into the snow, the cold sliding through my socks, biting my toes. As I bent to pull the trash bin, a sharp click sounded behind me. I turned. The door was shut, the deadbolt turned. Through the glass, Loretta stood with her arms crossed. Her lips moved slowly, and I read each word. "The cold will teach you gratitude." My heart pounded, equal parts rage and fear. "Mom, please open the door. I'm sorry. I'll tell Miss Grant it was a misunderstanding." My voice was swallowed by the wind, burning my throat. She didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly, then slid the top lock into place. The porch light went out, the house falling into darkness. I ran to the back door. Locked. The garage keypad wouldn't work. She had changed the code. It hit me that everything had been prepared beforehand. I turned toward Mrs. Whitman's house next door. The glow of her TV seeped through thin curtains. I stumbled over, slipping on ice, pounding the doorbell. The door camera's red light blinked. I tried to speak loudly, my lips numb. Mrs. Whitman! It's Hannah! I've been locked out. Please open the door. A shadow moved behind the curtain. The fabric shifted slightly, then stilled. The living room lights stayed on, but no one came. I rang the bell again and again, my fingers aching like needles piercing them. No answer. Just the sound of the wind and my own quick, uneven breathing. I don't know how long it was before my body started to slow down. Every movement felt heavier. My eyes burned, my mind blurred. Then I heard the upstairs window at my house creak open. Tyler, lit from behind by the TV, leaned out with his phone. Smile for the camera, Hannah. His voice carried across the frozen air. I don't know where I found the strength, but I looked up, raising my hand to shield my face. He only leaned further out, zooming in. In that moment, I didn't just feel cold. I felt exposed, made into a sideshow, and every eye in the neighborhood had chosen silence. If you think this story ends with one cold night, you're going to be more surprised than you can imagine. I'll keep telling it, because that night was only the start of a dark chain of truths I'd never dared reveal. The wind lashed my face like whips, blurring my eyes and making each breath heavier. I couldn't feel my toes anymore, just a deep, crawling numbness climbing my legs. I tried dragging the trash bin back toward the door, hoping the noise might make my mother change her mind, but all I heard was the plastic wheels grinding against ice and the wind's howl. Looking back up at the second-floor window, Tyler was still there, phone in hand, eyes gleaming in the light. He didn't say another word, just smiled, thin and colder than the storm. I tried calling out again, but my voice was hoarse, each word catching in my throat against the freezing air. No one answered. No one opened the door. When the first wave of panic passed, my body reacted strangely. I wasn't shivering as hard anymore, just slowing down, dangerously so. Every breath seemed to take more effort, my eyelids heavy as if weighted. I sank onto the steps, hugging my knees, trying to hold in what little warmth was left. Across the street, Mrs. Whitman's lights were still on. I could hear faint laughter from her TV, the sound of some show. I clung to that sound as if it tethered me to the world behind the glass. But then, the sharp click of a window shutting from my house made me flinch. When I looked up, Tyler was gone. I don't remember exactly when I blacked out. Just that the wind seemed quieter, snow falling slower, and everything around me covered in a soft haze. The laughter, the wind, the sound of my feet on ice, all drifted away. When I opened my eyes, the blinding white ceiling of a hospital was above me. The smell of antiseptic, the steady beep of a heart monitor. I felt the heat from electric blankets wrapped around me, though my toes still tingled with cold. A nurse was adjusting the IV line. "You're awake, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice gentle, though her eyes stayed focused on her work. I tried to ask, Who brought me here?" "The lady across the street. She said she was taking her dog out this morning and found you lying on the porch steps." I stayed quiet. I couldn't tell if what I felt was gratitude or bitterness. The truth was, Mrs. Whitman had seen me the night before. She'd been standing right behind the curtain, but she only stepped in once the sun came up, when I was already barely conscious. A while later, the doctor came in to check on me. He said I had severe hypothermia and frostbite on my toes, and I'd need to be monitored for a few days. I heard it the way you hear a weather report, clear, factual, but distant. That afternoon, I asked to borrow a phone so I could log into my social media account. When the screen lit up, dozens of notifications crowded my lock screen. Tags, messages, comments. Curious and uneasy, I opened them. Tyler's video. It showed me curled up, sitting on the porch steps, snow in my hair, arms wrapped around my knees. The title he'd given it, Snow Princess Rehearsing Her Act. Soft laughter played in the background, along with Tyler's own voice. "Smile for the camera, little sis." The comments underneath chilled me more than the snow had. "Oh my God, so dramatic. She's just putting on a show. Your sister's a total drama queen." No one asked why I was out there. No one wondered why I wasn't dressed warmly enough. I was just a joke for them to pick apart. That evening, the principal sent an email to every student in the school. The subject line read, "Recognizing composure under pressure." Inside, he praised Tyler for remaining calm and not overreacting to family conflict. I knew Loretta had called him, told her version of the story, and spun it exactly the way she wanted. In the hospital room, I heard the door open. A woman stepped in, silver hair neatly pinned, holding a box of cookies and a card. It was Mrs. Henson, who lived 3 houses down. "For Tyler," she said. "I want him to know I'm proud he's so patient." She didn't look at me. Not a single question about how I was doing. I just gave a faint smile and took it like I was a mail carrier passing something along. That night, the hospital was quiet, only the sound of the heater and nurses' shoes on the floor. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking of every turned-away glance, every door that had closed on me. And then, a quiet resolve formed. They had turned my story into a joke, a fake testament to Tyler's calm. But I would not let that be the only truth that existed. I closed my eyes, burning into my memory the image of the red light on Mrs. Whitman's doorbell camera. It had seen everything. And one day, I'd find a way to reclaim that light, to expose what they'd tried so hard to bury. The morning I was discharged, the air still carried the smell of fresh snow, a sharp chill slipping into every gap in my coat. Loretta came to pick me up, her smile thin, one that strangers might think was gentle, but I knew meant another storm was coming. She opened the car door, saying nothing the whole drive home. The only sounds were the tires crunching over ice and soft country music from the radio. As we turned onto our street, Loretta finally spoke, her tone light but cutting deep. "I hope you've learned your lesson this time, Hannah. We don't want this getting blown out of proportion again, do we?" I looked out the window, avoiding her gaze. "I understand, Mom." She smiled, resting her hands on the wheel like she'd just heard the right answer. But I knew it was just another performance, for anyone who might overhear. A few days later, the rumors at school spread faster than the winter wind. But what stunned me wasn't the teasing from classmates, it was how carefully everything had been arranged. I overheard one of my mother's phone calls in the kitchen, her voice soft, warm, like she was sharing a burden. "She's still impulsive, but I'm trying to help her. Tyler's wonderful, handling so much pressure and still keeping his composure. I just hope people understand." The refrigerator door reflected her image, standing tall, hair neatly pinned, a faint smile. No trace of the woman who had left her daughter outside in a snowstorm. That afternoon, Loretta hosted a coffee gathering for a few close neighbors. I wasn't invited, of course. But from my room upstairs, I could hear the clink of cups, chairs scraping the floor, light laughter. The smell of fresh waffle cookies drifted through the house, but woven into it were scraps of conversation slipping under my door. "She's so sensitive. Lately her behavior's been hard to manage. Tyler's really such a mature young man." I didn't need to hear the rest to know who they were talking about, and who was being painted as the shining example. That evening, after the guests had left, I went downstairs for some water. The dining table was spotless, only my mother's coffee cup sitting next to her phone. She was texting quickly, fingers moving like she was handling urgent business. Seeing me, she looked up. "Hannah, I've talked to everyone. They won't misunderstand you anymore, as long as you don't bring up things that might worry them." I took a sip of water, keeping my voice steady. "So I'm not allowed to tell the truth?" She set her phone down, tilting her head like I'd asked a naive question. The truth is you made a mess, and I had to clean it up. We don't need everyone knowing our private family matters, do we?" I stayed silent. It was her usual tactic, turning everything into my fault, wrapping it in fake concern. The next day at school, I saw the full effect of that coffee gathering. People who had once avoided looking at me now smiled and nodded, as if granting me some kind of forgiveness. A few classmates whispered, "I heard she's in therapy now. Her mom's really worried. It's good she's there for her." No one asked me directly. They only repeated the story Loretta had fed them, a story where I was the unstable one, and Tyler was the long-suffering victim. That night, I sat in my room, looking out the window toward Mrs. Whitman's house. Her living room light was still on, the thin curtain hanging like a faint wall separating two worlds. I remembered clearly that night, her shadow moving behind the curtain, and the red glow of the doorbell camera blinking. That tiny light was the only witness to what had really happened. I took out paper and pen, writing down every detail. The time, the weather, who was where, what was said. I didn't know when or how, but I was certain of one thing. There would come a time when I'd need these. In the days that followed, Loretta kept up her role as the perfect mother in everyone's eyes. She posted a photo of Tyler and me, taken last year on social media, captioned, "Family is everything." The post drew dozens of congratulatory, admiring comments. I looked at myself in that picture, my forced smile, shoulders slightly hunched, and wondered if anyone could see through it. On Friday evening, while Tyler was in the living room playing video games with friends, I heard him burst out laughing. "Hey, check this out," he said. A short clip popped up on the TV screen. Me, shivering in the snow, sped up and set to goofy music. Tyler's friends roared with laughter. "Hannah, you're basically an internet star now." One of them called into the kitchen. I stood there holding my glass of water, feeling both frozen and burning. Loretta came down the stairs, showing no sign of disapproval. She just glanced at me, then spoke to Tyler's friends. "Have your fun, boys, but make sure this doesn't get out any further." I knew get out didn't mean on the internet. It meant outside the story she had built. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the wind outside my window replayed every moment of that night in my head. I opened my laptop, searching for how doorbell cameras worked. I read that most systems store footage for 30 to 60 days unless manually deleted. I started calculating. It had only been a little over a week since that night. There was still time. Don't look away, because I'm about to find a piece of evidence my mother can't erase. That thought was like a small spark, but it was enough to warm me against the layers of ice Loretta had tried to wrap around her story. I knew when that spark ignited, it would burn down every stage she'd built. I began digging through the things that had been untouched for years in my small room. It wasn't just to kill time or for nostalgia. I knew in those old folders, in those crumpled paper boxes, there might be pieces that proved Loretta had done this to me long before. This wasn't some momentary lapse like she wanted everyone to believe. The bottom drawer of my desk creaked as I pulled it open. Inside was a thin, worn cardboard box. I recognized it instantly. The box where I'd hidden the most important things when I was little. Because in this house, anything that was mine could be controlled or taken away. I pulled it out, brushing off a thin layer of dust. Old notebooks, a few childhood photos with friends, some movie ticket stubs, and then, wedged at the bottom, a pale yellow folder with curled edges. On the top left corner were the printed words, "Northern Science and Engineering Summer Residency." I almost held my breath as I opened it. The letter was still there, stationary with the program's logo neatly typed, telling me I'd been accepted into the science research camp I'd dreamed of since I was 15. At the bottom was the signature of the program director. Even though time had yellowed the paper, the joy I'd felt that day flooded back so vividly that my hands trembled. But that memory was quickly overlaid with another. Loretta standing in the kitchen, one hand holding the torn letter, the other holding a coffee cup. "You're not going anywhere. Only strangers abandon their families, Hannah." She'd said it like a final verdict. I remembered trying to explain it was a full scholarship, that it would open doors to college, that I'd worked so hard to earn it. But Loretta cut me off. "Not my daughter. You're staying home, and you'll be grateful for it." That night, I cried in the bathroom, biting a towel so no one would hear. But the next morning, Loretta still rested her hand on my shoulder in front of the neighbors, smiling softly like she'd just given me a gift. Now, holding that letter, I understood. It wasn't just an opportunity stolen. It was a part of my life cut off, a time I was forced to believe that my dreams were a betrayal. I turned over the folder and noticed a small piece of paper taped to the back. It was a printed page from the program's website, showing photos of the dorms, labs, and pine trees dusted with snow. I remembered printing it out to hang on my wall, dreaming of a different kind of winter, a winter that wasn't punishment. I laid everything out on my desk, photographing each page. I knew if I kept these things too long in this house, they might vanish. Loretta had a way of erasing all traces, just as she'd done with me for years. As I kept searching, my hand touched a light blue hardcover notebook. My stomach tightened instantly. The ingratitude journal Loretta had made me write in every day since I was 10. The first page was in her neat, rounded handwriting. Write 3 things you're grateful for about your family every day. No exceptions, no excuses. When I was younger, I'd written innocent things like, "I'm grateful Mom bought me a new sweater," or "I'm grateful Tyler walked me to the bus stop." But over time, the tone shifted. The sentences grew shorter, colder. "I'm grateful Mom reminds me not to be selfish. I'm grateful Tyler teaches me to be quiet." I flipped to a page that made my throat tighten. It was a crude drawing. A little girl curled up in the snow, surrounded by jagged blue lines for cold wind. In the corner was a small red dot, the doorbell camera light. I had drawn it long before the awful night happened, as if my instincts had warned me of a future to come. I placed the drawing beside the scholarship letter. One was an opportunity stolen. The other was a child's premonition of the fear she'd be forced to relive. Together, they were proof that Loretta's actions weren't impulsive but part of a calculated, repeated pattern. That night, I took a risky step. While Loretta was busy on the phone in the kitchen, I emailed the town's police chief, attaching photos of the journal pages, the drawing, and the scholarship letter. Subject line: evidence of prolonged control and harm. I didn't expect an immediate response. I just knew this time I wouldn't be silent. About an hour later, as I was putting the papers away, Tyler suddenly opened my door, leaning against the frame with his familiar mocking smile. "What are you up to, Hannah? Writing more of your nonsense?" "It's none of your business." I kept my voice steady, hiding the folder under my sweater. "Mom told me to keep an eye on you. Don't let things get out of hand." I looked him straight in the eye. "The only thing out of hand here is the way you and Mom treat me." Tyler laughed, but I caught that brief flicker of caution in his eyes. He left the room without another word, but I knew I'd just made him realize I was no longer the quiet girl who endured everything. I didn't know when I would find that USB drive, or if it even existed. But I was ready. This time, any piece of evidence that appeared, I wouldn't let it vanish like so many winters before. I had already sent an email to the police with the evidence I'd found, but deep down, I knew it still wasn't enough to tear down the entire story. Loretta was too skilled at building walls to protect herself, and she had no problem bending every detail to paint me as the unstable one. I needed something that could make it all collapse with a single touch, something undeniable, something that couldn't be erased. In the days that followed, I lived in a constant state of high alert. I avoided going into the kitchen when Loretta was home and always locked my bedroom door whenever I left. It felt like she could appear behind me at any moment, smiling sweetly while her eyes held nothing but control. On Thursday afternoon, I received a strange message on Messenger. Just a few words. Just a few words. "Hannah, I think I can help." At first, I thought it was a joke. But then, reading it again, I remembered someone, Sarah Miller, an old classmate. We'd once shared a lab table in 10th grade chemistry, but after the incident with Loretta, Sarah gradually avoided me. The last time I saw her was in the school hallway when she pretended not to hear me say hello. I typed back, "Sarah, is that you?" It took her a while to respond. "Yeah. I saw Tyler's video. I know I believed the wrong story before. I'm sorry for staying silent." I paused before asking, "Why are you reaching out now?" "Because I overheard your mom talking to Mrs. Whitman at the grocery store last week. I didn't catch everything, but Mrs. Whitman has something she's keeping. I think it's video from her doorbell camera. Sarah's words sent a jolt down my spine. I'd suspected that for a long time, but this was the first time someone else confirmed it. I immediately asked, "Are you sure?" "Sure." I heard Mrs. Whitman whisper, "I still have it, but I don't want trouble." That night, I could hardly sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined a small USB drive somewhere in Mrs. Whitman's house, holding the whole truth of that night. But how could I get to it? She'd once stood behind that curtain without opening the door for me. The next morning, after Loretta left early, I decided to take my chances. I walked to Mrs. Whitman's house, my hand tightening around the wool gloves in my pocket. She opened the door, her face surprised but not entirely caught off guard. "Hannah, what do you need?" I swallowed hard. "I just wanted to ask, that night, did your doorbell camera record anything?" Mrs. Whitman frowned slightly, glancing up and down the street as if afraid someone might see. "Hannah, that's in the past." "But it's not in the past for me," I said, my voice trembling. "I know you have the footage." She stayed silent for a long moment before letting out a sigh. "Tonight, 7 o'clock, the cafe on the corner of Maple. We'll talk there." The whole day, I was restless, like sitting on hot coals. When the time came, I stepped into the warm cafe, the bell over the door chiming softly. Mrs. Whitman was already in the corner, a half-empty cappuccino in front of her. When I sat down, she placed a small envelope on the table and slid it toward me. "This is a copy," she said quietly. "I saved it before your mother called everyone in the neighborhood, telling them to delete everything. I'm sorry I didn't help you that night." I opened the envelope. Inside was a black USB drive, slightly scratched. I looked at her, unsure whether to thank her or resent her. She only gave a small nod. "I know. Silence is part of the guilt." We said nothing more. Back in my room, I plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen showed a single video file, over a gigabyte in size. I pressed play. The image was clearer than I expected. There I was, standing on her porch, wind whipping my hair across my face, my whole body shaking. The doorbell chimed over and over. My voice was hoarse. "Mrs. Whitman, I'm locked out. I need help, please." And then, as clearly as if she were standing right beside me, Loretta's voice came from across the street. "Don't open it. She needs to learn her lesson." Next came Tyler's laughter, the sound of my house's second-story window opening, and the sight of him holding out his phone to record. I saw myself slipping on the steps, collapsing, snow covering my shoulders. Then I lay still, only the red glow of the camera blinking. I watched it again and again, my heartbeat pounding louder each time. This was it. This was what I needed. That same night, I saved the file in 3 different places: my laptop, an external hard drive, and a cloud storage service. I wasn't foolish enough to keep just one copy. The next morning, I called Sarah. "I have it. The video." She was quiet for a few seconds before saying, "Hannah, sometimes one thing like that is enough to bring every wall down. But you have to be ready for what comes after." I knew she was right. Loretta wouldn't sit still once she realized I had this. But for the first time in years, the balance of power tilted toward me, and I wasn't going to back down. You wouldn't believe what's on the USB drive she handed me. I sat staring at my laptop's dark screen, the final image of the video burned into my memory. Me lying motionless in the snow, and in the distance, framed perfectly, my mother, standing tall, arms crossed, her expression calm as if it were just another ordinary evening. I sat there, fingers on the keyboard but not typing a single word. The USB lay beside the laptop, somehow feeling both weightless and unbearably heavy. I knew that with one click, the world would see the truth of that night, not through my words, not through my emotions, but through raw, undeniable images and sound. And I also knew that once it was out there, nothing would ever be the same again. I opened my video editor, trimming away empty moments, keeping only the crucial parts, me at the door, my pleas for help, Loretta's voice ringing clear, and Tyler's laughter. I added captions, not to make it easier to understand, but so that anyone watching could never pretend they didn't hear it. When I hit save, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I chose to upload the video to an anonymous social media account, one not linked to my real name. The only title: "This is how a child is taught gratitude in the middle of a Minnesota winter." No long captions, no explanations, no photos of me or anyone's name. It only took a few hours for the video to start spreading. At first, a few dozen shares, then hundreds. A child advocacy group used the hashtag #ColdEyesNotLove and urged people to share it to stop things like this from happening again. By midnight, thousands of comments had poured in. There were words full of anger. "Anyone who does this to a child doesn't deserve to be called a parent. I hope the authorities step in." There were words of deep empathy. I was locked outside in the winter as a kid too. Watching this made me shiver. Praying this girl is out of that environment. But there were also skeptical comments. "What if this is staged? You can't even see her face. How do we know it's real?" I didn't reply to anyone. I knew the truth in the video was strong enough to stand on its own. By the next morning, messages started flooding my phone. Some were from strangers, but a few numbers I recognized. The most glaring was the name Mom. I didn't open it right away. I left it there, like a bright red stain on my screen. Around 10 a.m., Sarah called. "Hannah, did you see? The video made it to the news. Not just the town paper, the state paper." I opened my browser. Sure enough, she was right. A major news site had posted it with the headline, "Outrageous video. Teen left outside in -20 degrees." They didn't name me, but described the setting well enough that anyone around here would know. At the same time, I got a message from a reporter asking for an interview. I declined. I didn't want this to be turned into a sensational story. I wanted it to be evidence. That afternoon, as I sat by the window watching snowflakes drift down, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there was Loretta. She wore a long gray coat, a wool scarf wrapped around her neck. But what caught my attention wasn't her tidy appearance. It was her eyes, a mix of anger and fear. "Is almost was. We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. I stood blocking the doorway. "There's nothing to talk about." "Hannah, you don't understand what you're doing. What you posted will destroy this family." I let out a small laugh, but not because I thought it was funny. This family was destroyed a long time ago. You just didn't want anyone to know. She started to say more, but stopped when she noticed a woman from across the street watching. Loretta inhaled deeply, then stepped back. "You'll regret this." She left that hanging in the air before turning away. I closed the door, feeling my heartbeat quicken, but it wasn't from fear. 2 days later, the video had passed 1 million views. A national domestic violence support organization reached out, saying they could help me work with lawyers and authorities. I knew this was the moment I had to step into the light. That evening, I reposted the video on my real account, this time with the caption, "I'm Hannah Cole. I was 15 when this happened. I'm 33 now, and I'm ready to tell everything." The comments grew faster than anything I'd ever seen. Many people recognized me from school. Some apologized for believing Loretta's version of events. Others simply said, "We believe you." Local TV news started reaching out. I agreed to one short interview, on the condition they air the full video and not cut me off when I spoke. When the broadcast aired, I saw myself on the TV, not the 15-year-old girl curled up in the snow, but a woman sitting upright, voice steady, eyes looking straight into the camera. I don't want pity. I want people to understand that silence only protects the abuser. The segment ended with the video playing again, this time with captions and a domestic violence hotline number on the screen. I turned off the TV and sat in the dark. The wind still howled outside, but it no longer carried the chill of fear. It felt more like a reminder that this winter, the story no longer belonged to Loretta, it belonged to me. 3 days after I revealed my name and the video, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. A deep, rough male voice came through the line. "Hannah, is that you?" I froze. It had been more than 20 years since I'd heard that voice. Who is this?" "It's your dad, Jack Cole." The name hit me like a stone dropped into a still pond. My father had disappeared from my life when I was just 7 years old. Everything I knew about him came from Loretta, that he left out of selfishness, that he couldn't handle responsibility, that he never truly loved me. I stayed silent, listening to him sigh on the other end. "I saw the video. I know you're telling the truth, but maybe you don't know. Your mother did something similar to me, just in different ways." I couldn't hold back the question. "Why did you leave?" "Because I thought if I got out, things would get better." I was wrong. We agreed to meet the next afternoon at a small diner halfway between my town and his. That night, I didn't sleep. 1,000 scenarios ran through my head. He could be looking for an excuse to justify leaving me, or worse, he could be working with Loretta to regain control of the narrative. The diner sat on the side of a quiet road, the air carrying the scent of burnt coffee and bacon. I arrived early, choosing a corner booth. About 10 minutes later, a man walked in. His hair had gone gray, his face lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were still bright and wary. He placed a manila envelope on the table before sitting down. "I'm not expecting you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know the truth." Inside the envelope was a stack of hospital papers documenting a time I was admitted at age 9 with a diagnosis of mild hypothermia and first-degree frostbite on the hands. I couldn't remember it clearly, only a vague image of myself standing outside the house in the freezing cold. Loretta had never mentioned it again, and I had forgotten. "See?" Dad said, his voice thick. "Your mother's been doing this for a long time. Not just once." I flipped further and found a few photocopies of handwritten letters Loretta had sent to acquaintances after Dad left. In them, she painted him as mentally unstable and even fabricated a story that he had hit me. She did that so people would believe I was the bad guy, so no one would trust anything I said. I leaned back in my chair, feeling like every puzzle piece in my life was falling into place, revealing a larger, darker picture. "Why didn't you come back?" I asked, my voice trembling. He lowered his head, his hand gripping the coffee cup tightly. "I was scared. Scared I'd lose everything. Scared you'd hate me. And I thought you were okay." That sentence felt like a second knife. I drew in a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You know, I believed everything Mom said. I thought you were the one who abandoned me." He looked up, his eyes shining with deep regret. "I know, and that's the thing I regret most." We sat in silence for a long while. Then he slid the envelope toward me. "Keep these papers. They might help you, not just in court, but to remind you that you're not crazy, you didn't make anything up." I tucked the envelope into my bag, feeling both heavy and light. Heavy with what it contained, light because I finally knew I wasn't the only one who'd seen Loretta's true face. Before leaving the diner, Dad added, "Hannah, this time, don't stay silent. Do what I couldn't." I nodded. In my mind, a plan began to take shape. Everything I had, the USB video, my journals, the torn scholarship letter, and now the hospital records, would become one seamless chain of evidence, airtight. I decided, this time, no one would twist my truth again. Driving home, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The road stretched out behind me under a fresh layer of snow, so bright it almost hurt to look at. I thought, maybe for the first time in years, I actually saw snow as beautiful. Not because it was cold or because it concealed, but because it made everything clearer. And I knew the next step would leave Loretta with no way out. I still remember that afternoon vividly, every detail etched into my memory. The sky was a heavy gray, low clouds sagging like they were weighed down with the promise of a thick snowfall. The wind swept across the school parking lot, carrying that biting, metallic scent unique to a Minnesota winter. I hurried toward the bus, clutching my backpack strap to shield my right arm, where a bruise in the distinct shape of fingers stood out. It had happened during the last period of the day, in math class. My teacher, Mrs. Grant, had kept me after. She sat at her desk, her eyes warm but firm. "Hannah, what happened to your arm?" I almost lied, but when her gaze didn't waver, the excuses caught in my throat. "Tyler grabbed me. Yesterday I wouldn't let him copy my test." I hadn't meant to tell her, but the words slipped out faster than my thoughts. Mrs. Grant sighed, nodding slightly. "I'm going to have to notify your family. Hannah, this isn't something small." The whole ride home, I sat hunched in the back seat of the bus, my insides burning but my hands and feet frozen. I knew Mrs. Grant's call would reach the house before I did, and I knew exactly how Loretta would react. In this house, the lines of right and wrong were drawn clearly, and I was almost always on the wrong side. When the door opened, warmth hit my face, but it didn't chase away the cold in my bones. Tyler sat on the couch, eyes glued to his phone, the corner of his mouth curling like he'd just heard some satisfying news. Loretta was somewhere in the kitchen, the sound of chopping and the faint aroma of stew drifting through the air. Dinner that night unfolded as if nothing unusual had happened. Plates lined up neatly, a cinnamon-scented candle flickering in the center of the table, a bright green salad arranged next to the roast. But I could feel the tension in every thread of the air. Loretta chatted about the weather, smiling, but not once looking at me. Tyler ate while fidgeting with his fork, occasionally glancing my way with an expectant look, like someone waiting for the climax of a play. When the meal ended, I stood to clear the dishes. Loretta stayed seated, cradling a glass of wine, her eyes calculating the perfect moment to issue a command. After I rinsed the last plate, her voice came, gentle, almost kind. "Hannah, tomorrow's trash day. Go out and bring the bins in for me, will you?" I glanced toward the window. The sky had deepened to a bruised purple, the wind spinning snowflakes into tight spirals. The temperature had surely dropped below 10 degrees, and I was in nothing but soft pajama pants and a thin sweater. "Mom, can I do it in the morning?" Loretta turned her head, her eyes colder than the air outside. I said now. I knew that tone. If I argued one more word, the consequences would be far worse. I lowered my head and walked toward the front door. The wind knifed through me as soon as I opened it. Snow was falling so thick that within seconds my hair was dusted white. I hurried down the steps, my feet sinking into the icy powder, dragging the heavy trash bin toward the house. A sharp click behind me made me turn. Loretta stood framed in the doorway, arms crossed. Her lips moved, and I could read each word despite the wind howling in my ears. "The cold will teach you gratitude." I froze, then bolted toward the door. "Mom, open the door! I'm sorry. I'll tell Mrs. Grant it was a misunderstanding." She didn't answer. Instead, I saw her hand twist the deadbolt. The porch light snapped off, plunging me into darkness. I ran around to the back door. Locked. The garage? I keyed in the code, but the system beeped an error. She'd changed it. Every entry point was sealed. I looked toward Mrs. Whitman's house next door. The glow of her TV flickered from the living room, her shadow moving behind the curtain. I slogged through the snow toward her place, slipping once, my hands stinging with cold. I rang the bell, the ding-dong echoing, and the tiny red light on her camera blinked on.
"Mrs. Whitman!"
"It's Hannah."
"I've been locked out. Please open the door."
The curtain shifted slightly. A figure moved toward the window, but stayed still. No sound of a lock turning, just the wind and my own breath. I pressed the bell again and again, until my fingertip felt like it was being pricked with needles. Still, no answer. Then, from the second floor of my own house, a window slid open. Tyler appeared, phone in hand, the screen's light casting a glow on his face. "Smile, Hannah!" he called down. I stepped back, tilting my head up, but no words came out. The wind seemed to swallow every sound. If you think the story ends with just one cold night, you're in for an even bigger surprise. I could feel the chills seeping deep into my skin, but the real pain didn't come from the snow or the wind. It came from knowing that inside those warmly lit doors, everyone saw and chose to stay silent. After the trial, my life began to change in a slow but certain way. Not the loud, dramatic kind of change the newspapers had written about, but quiet shifts, new habits, calm mornings, afternoons no longer filled with the tension of waiting for a threatening footstep or a sharp knock on the door. I moved in with Aunt Maggie. Her small house sat on the edge of town, surrounded by a wooden fence and a lush green lawn. From the very first day, she told me plainly, "Here, you don't have to ask permission to pour yourself another glass of water or open a window. A home is for living in, not for enduring." Those simple words, to me, carried the weight of an entire escape. I slowly got used to opening the fridge whenever I wanted, leaving a book half-read on the table without worrying it would disappear somewhere. Aunt Maggie never asked what I wanted for dinner in that prying tone. I knew she asked only to make sure I got something I enjoyed. Once, when I made myself another cup of tea but forgot to pour out the leftover water from the kettle, I instinctively braced for a sharp reprimand like I would have at my old house. But she just smiled, picked up the kettle, poured herself some, and said, "Perfect timing, I was thirsty too." We gradually fell into a new rhythm. In the mornings, she usually woke up first, made toast and coffee, and left me a little note if she had to go out early. In the evenings, we'd sit and watch movies, sometimes chatting about the little things in our day, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. A month after moving in, I received an invitation to the graduation ceremony for the continuing education program I had completed alongside the court process. At first, I thought about declining. For most of my life, ceremonies and public stages had been places where Loretta performed her perfect family act, with me as the unwilling prop. But Aunt Maggie encouraged me. "This one is yours. No one gets to take this moment from you anymore." The day of the ceremony, the hall wasn't large, just a few dozen people. When the MC invited me up to receive my diploma, I walked toward the wooden podium, still feeling a small tremor inside. The person holding the microphone asked if I wanted to share a few words. I looked down at the diploma in my hand, then at the row of seats where Aunt Maggie sat smiling encouragingly, and I knew I didn't want to miss the chance. "My name is Hannah Cole," I began, my voice sounding steadier than I expected. I used to think that gratitude was something I owed to others, especially those who gave me a roof, food, or clothes. I was taught that I should stay silent, keep smiling, even when I was hurt. But I've learned something else. True gratitude isn't tied to submission. It's tied to safety and being seen. Some people in the audience lowered their heads, others gave a small nod. I went on. "I forgive, but I don't forget. And it's that memory that reminds me how far I've come." Applause rose, long and even. As I stepped down from the podium, I felt as if I'd left part of a burden there. A few weeks later, an envelope arrived from the prison. On the front was Loretta's handwriting, still that same slanted, rounded style as always. I sat for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Hannah, I hope you're finding peace. I don't expect you to understand or forgive, only to know that I've been thinking about everything too. Mom." I folded the letter, feeling neither anger nor sentimentality. Just emptiness. It was like an echo from somewhere far away that I no longer belonged to. In the spring, I had an errand that took me past the street where Loretta's old house still stood. It had been repainted, the fence repaired, a basket of purple flowers hanging on the porch. A child's bike leaned near the door, and through the front window I saw a little girl with curly blonde hair playing. She looked out, caught my gaze, and smiled, waving. I paused for a few seconds, then returned the smile. No painful memories rushed in, only a sense of release. That house now belonged to someone else, and my stories there were closed. On the way back, I realized a simple truth. Healing isn't about waiting for the person who hurt you to apologize. It's about the moment you no longer need that apology to keep living. I hadn't forgotten what I'd been through, but it no longer held me captive in the winter of my 15th year. I kept walking, under the clear April sky, feeling as if I had truly stepped out of the cold past. Everyone has their own way of facing their past. I chose not to let old wounds define my future, but I know for others, that journey may look very different. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you have the courage to walk away, or would you try to mend things? I believe that whatever the choice, the most important thing is to keep your peace and self-respect. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to follow the channel so we can share more real-life stories about family loss and those rare moments of healing.